Hello, everybody, and welcome to this product showcase from us here at Mobilityways. I see that there's a whole flurry of attendees joining, and so we'll just give people a moment to finish logging in, and then we'll be getting going in just a moment's time. So bear with us as we just wait for more participants to join.
At the moment, we've got a situation in which when people commute, the number of people in a vehicle is tending more and more to one. We need to get that way up from where it is, because every time it goes down, that's more carbon miles being pushed into the atmosphere. So the message to employers is put more people in cars, promote sharing, promote ride sharing, promote sharing of vehicles, and promote use of buses and other public services of zero carbon emissions. And then hopefully we can get that way back heading in the right direction.
Welcome to the Minister. We're thrilled to have you here. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy diary to allow us to showcase DERF this morning. Also, many thanks to our partners at ACEL who provide this fantastic electric bus for us to carry out the tour on today. You'll hear more about our partnership with Mobilityways and how we try to decarbonise the commute for all of the staff who work at DERF.
DERF is split into sort of three areas. All of DERF 2 is rail linked, so there's three buildings. We've got Eddie Stobart in a 420,000 square foot building there. We've got Sainsbury's that we'll just come up to on the left, which is nearly 1 million square foot, and we've got a 800,000 square foot unit that Tesco are occupying. We extended our rail corridor from the existing rail terminal to rail link all of those, and to also provide us with the opportunity to bring rail into DERF 3, which is where we're going to have a look today, which is our 7.8 million square foot expansion of DERF. On park at the moment, DERF 1 and DERF 2, there's probably about 8,000 to 10,000 people employed on park, with DERF 3 sort of potentially doubling that.
Commuting at the moment is using an awful lot of carbon, and it's putting it in the atmosphere. And so commute zero, bringing that carbon down to zero or net zero, is incredibly important from our point of view as part of a decarbonisation drive across the economy.
My role is to look after all of our customers and their pain points, as we call them at Prologis. We work hand in glove with our customers from concept to completion. We support them with transport solutions, hence why we're all here today with the wonderful Mobilityways, and we've been able to make this happen for our customers.
So if Prologis, they didn't expend this effort on promoting car sharing, what would be the emissions? If there wasn't a Zelo bus service, actually it would be way up here. So what this does is it brings it all together in one place. It allows us to understand where we would have been, but crucially it shows us actually where we are now, and it evidences the savings.
What's most important is that we don't just understand how people commute, but we want to understand why. We want to understand what the barriers are to travelling more sustainably, what incentives and interventions might help overcome those barriers, and how therefore we make change happen. The need is very clear. Transport's the biggest emitter now in the UK, and the commute contributes 18 billion kilos of CO2 every year, 5% of our total emissions. And there was a recognition when the decarbonisation of the transport plan was released in July 21 that unless we address commute emissions in their own right, we won't be hitting our net zero goals.
I mean, increasingly you've got a workforce in these big companies which is aware of its carbon footprint, trying to do something to benefit the country and the world as a whole. So you're going to get the opportunity to open up new markets if you can extend that zero carbon footprint. But you've also got a workforce and staff who'll be happier and more excited about the contribution that they're making as a result.
Excellent. Well, welcome everybody to our Mobilityways product showcase. We are joined here today by a team of my colleagues here at Mobilityways. We've got Kyle Reesey from our product team, Sarah Roberts, our head of product, and Max Saville-Brown, one of our account managers. And what we're going to be doing today is taking you through some of the headline highlights of our product suite. Very often with our webinar series, we try and be a little transparent in the background and not make it a big sales pitch for our products and services. But today we are making this a pretty front and central demonstration of what we can do. And so can I have the next slide, please, Jackson? So why do we care about the commute? Well, the commute is responsible for 5% of all UK emissions. And whilst 5%, you can say, well, there's 95% of other things going on. The key here is we will not be able to achieve net zero unless we decarbonize the commute. And interestingly, the commute is different to any other journey. Historically, it's always been lumped in by mode of transport. So, car emissions or bus emissions, train emissions. But the commute is different. We don't have the luxury of commuting or making decisions on the commute. It's often a journey we have to make. And therefore, we believe that looking at the commute as specialists will help us to support large employers to make a difference in their Scope 3 commute emissions. The government released a transport decarbonisation plan in 2021, and that outlined for the first time the government policy of commute zero, the idea of getting the commute down to net zero. Come over the next slide, please. So we work with large employers, and we work with hundreds of public sector and private sector organisations here in the UK. And almost always their decarbonisation journey for the commute is tied to operational benefits as well. And we support large employers in increasing their access to talent pools for recruitment and retention reasons, improving the well-being of their staff, and supporting the cost of living crisis in their employees' pockets by allowing them to travel more sustainably and cheaper. So it's really important as we go through our webinar today that you don't just think about the sustainability and environmental benefits of decarbonising the commute, but you also think about the operational benefits as well. And I'm sure as my colleagues go through the different products and services today, they'll be outlining some of those operational benefits alongside the environmental benefits. Can I have the next slide, please, Jackson? So just a little bit about us. We're called Mobilityways, and we have worked with over 700 large UK organisations. But you may know us by our old name, Liftshare. And so Liftshare is a company that's been going for 25 years, and we are the leading UK car share platform in the UK. And we have a free platform called liftshare.com, which we run as a social enterprise. But what happened is in the pandemic, we realized that there was a need for us to support our large employer clients far more broadly than just car sharing. And we'd become the preeminent experts in decarbonizing the commute. And we codified that into our new company name, Mobilityways. And for the last 3 years, that means we broadened our approach far beyond just lift sharing. And we now help hundreds of organizations not just getting their staff into cars and sharing together, although that's still, of course, a big part of what we do, but also moving to active travel, to public transport, and any other source of more sustainable transport. Can I have the next slide, please? So we work with a framework with our clients, which we call measure, reduce, report. And this is a very simple concept, but the idea is that without measurement, we're not able to help our clients understand what change they need to put in place. Very often, it's easy for an employer to jump straight to the solution without having the data they need to make informed decisions. For example, they might decide to promote active travel and encouraging their staff to cycle to work. But if they don't know what number of their staff have a viable public transport route or a viable active travel route, that might not be the smartest investment in capital expenditure and internal comms resources. So what we do is we help large employers to measure both the current emissions and calculate their current emissions, and also the potential for their emissions and analyze what's viable given the infrastructure available at the moment. We then can put in place with our clients reduction methods that are aligned to their situation. And we have various tools that help them to go about actually achieving reductions in their commuter emissions. And then we provide a comprehensive reporting suite to report on progress. So my colleagues are going to take you through some of the headlines here in our measure, reduce, report framework. And at the end of this session, we're going to have a time of Q&A. So throughout, please do add your questions to the Q&A panel in Zoom as they come to you. Just feel free to click on it and add your questions. We'll be looking at them in the background, ready to go for the end of the session. So please don't wait to the end of the session to add your Q&A. Get your Q&As in early. So I'm pleased to welcome Max Saville-Brown, one of our account management team, to start talking to you about some of our measurement solutions. Over to you, Max.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. With our measure, reduce and report framework in mind, I'm going to be taking you through some of the tools at our disposal to help you decarbonise the commute. And there really is no better place to start than our ACEL dashboard. We will help you as an organisation benchmark your total commuting emissions as a total, but really we are interested in the average commuter emissions level. That is what ACEL stands for. We'll provide you with a score based on the average employee, so you can understand the individual impact of commuting to your place of work. You can compare that to the UK average score, and you can also compare it site by site, so we can track ACEL based on a site by site basis or organisation-wide. A per person understanding will help you with any operational changes that you might have between now and your target year. Things like headcount change, office moves, new sites, travel schemes, etc. Like I say, we can then use that to calculate ACEL based on a site-by-site basis or company-wide. As you can see, it is in a very recognisable format, very similar to EPC. That is so it is the most simplest way of understanding your commuting emissions possible. I like to say that I'm not a fridge expert, but I can understand an energy efficient fridge based on an EPC score. We've taken a similar approach to it with ACEL. Once you've done 2 or more ACELs with us, we can then actually start to monitor your modal shift. So what I can then do is take an ACEL report for your organisation from 2022, and then look at the 2023 data, which is not clicking for me, but we can start to track the modal shift. So we can then start to monitor progress in certain areas of transport. Perhaps you put on a cycle to work scheme in the last year. EV salary sacrifice schemes are now very popular. We want to be tracking the changes that your staff are making. And there's really no better place than looking at the modal shift and what the impact of that modal shift has on your ACEL score. The end game here is to reach net zero, right? So we need to understand what is being effective at tracking towards your net zero targets. We will work with you as an organisation to really make this bespoke to your own targets. So we can start to recommend areas of success for you. How we calculate ACEL is through our survey software. So let me take you through that now. Your commuter emissions is powered by staff feedback, staff data. You'll be working alongside our consultancy team, ensuring that your survey is fit for purpose, so you can make informed data-driven decisions on planning and engagement. We have templates that you can use with pre-written questions, or you can customize them to your own degree. You can send as many surveys out as you want. However, we will work with you to do a big annual travel survey where we can calculate your ACEL score back. It is completely customizable, so we will work with you to make sure it fits your own brand guidelines. It is provided with the URL link, making it easy to share, and ultimately to get a good response rate. We want to make sure that we achieve a 5% margin of error. So the response rates need to be at a certain level, depending on the headcount that we're looking at. So we need to make it as engaging as possible, hence why you work with our consultancy team. We also have a very fun feature called scoping. Scoping is in 2 parts. We have a map and we have a report. Some people are visual, some people are written learners. So we accommodate both. I'll just very quickly take you through what that looks like. Scoping will plot your staff postcode data on a map to show you all of the viable options available to them today. It is what we refer to as the art of the possible. We need to make sure what we are looking at from a data perspective for this year is achievable year on year, so we can start to reduce ACEL. Scoping is the best place to start because we can see what is happening today. And what do I mean by what is happening? Well, there are a few things that we look at. We look at active travel, public transport, and the service operators, and lift share options. We also have a driving factor. I won't go too much into detail about the driving factor. I'm going to keep it at ×2. Ultimately, what that means is if you drive to work in 20 minutes, the public transport options that are shown will look at that with a ×2 distance, so 40-minute journeys. From a behaviour change perspective, ×2 is the most effective one to look at. So we can very quickly see different options. Active travel, we can start to see clusters of those that are able to walk, able to cycle, and those on the peripheries. Those we can start to target with different incentives, perhaps an e-bike or an e-scooter scheme. But really, we need to start understanding the numbers we're talking about here, so we can start to work towards your net zero target with you. So that's scoping. I'm not going to go too much into detail about the actual scoping report. If you do want more information, please come to your account manager or one of the team will be really happy to help you. Moving on then, we're going to go to personal travel plans. Personal travel plans are the education piece that we deliver to the individual. Really, it's to help your own staff make informed decisions on different options available to them. And I'll show you what that looks like very quickly. We are able to provide personal travel plans in different formats. We are able to do it as a URL, and it will look like what I've got on the screen now. We are able to do an iframe, and it will look something like that, where the person can drum in the information and get a personal travel plan back. Or, even nicer, is a button. You can put this into a staff portal, a website somewhere where your staff can access it freely, and they can then start to look at sustainable modes available to them. What I thought I would do with you all is have a look at my own one. This is my own PTP that we're looking at right now. This is not fake information at all. So you can actually see what it's telling me to do. We put our sustainable modes first. So we do not want to be encouraging your staff to make decisions based on an unsustainable mode, driving alone. We include driving alone right at the end, more as a benchmark, as an idea so the individual can understand the impact of changing mode. However, we don't want to be recommending that, so it's kind of hidden at the end, and we put the most sustainable, easiest, most convenient, sustainable option at the top. For me, that's popping out as Liftshare. I can see who those two Liftshare matches are, what their journeys are doing, and if you already have a Liftshare community with us, it will only show colleagues within your community on this map. So it won't be showing public options, it will show your colleagues, nice and secure. It makes it really easy to start matching with your colleagues. Also, park and ride, so we do include multimodal on here. We include the carbon footprint of that journey. So again, your staff can make fully informed decisions on the journeys that they're making. I hope that was somewhat helpful going through some of the components available to us to help you decarbonise the commute. I'll now be passing you on to my colleague Sarah, who will be diving into more of the Liftshare for work.
Thanks, Matt. So Liftshare is the #1 car sharing platform supporting large businesses and organisations with a bespoke Liftshare community. We enable your staff to share their cars to work and reduce their commuter emissions. Businesses can choose between configuring their scheme to only allowing sharing amongst their organisation, or widening it out to allow their staff to car share with our network of over 700,000 members. Every confirmed car share equates to saving thousands of carbon emissions every year for the workforce, tallying up how many miles have been taken off our roads, which both the member and the employer can view. Liftshare allows members to add journeys, send messages, view each other's profiles and more. We support hybrid working where the Monday to Friday structured commute is less popular, and also support shift workers where patterns may change frequently. The system does gamify car sharing with levels and badges to encourage the right behaviours and confirming real car shares using the Liftshare app's smart parking technology. Tracking shares using the Liftshare app and rewarding sustainable commuting behaviour can help with reducing car parking problems at site. We've got several case studies where implementing dedicated car share bays and Liftshare policy reduces congestion, parking complaints, and brings less cars to site each day. As well as the Liftshare app, Liftshare parking permits can also be downloaded and used to help manage those parking in those dedicated car share bays. They can be digital or paper permits. Next slide, please, Jackson. We support the onboarding and rollout of your Liftshare community with a dedicated account manager. They can help you with the promotional materials and marketing messages to promote your scheme internally using posters, emails, or any other materials that you need to get the message out to your staff. Every year we do hold a National Liftshare Week, which often gets promoted on local radio stations and has been picked up by the BBC in recent years. This is a great campaign for businesses to be involved with. You can benefit from all of that promotion that happens just from us sort of talking about it and local radio stations and the BBC. And this will encourage activity on your own Liftshare community. Next slide, please, Jackson. And lastly, on Liftshare is the dashboard. This is the back office of all of the statistics relating to your Liftshare community. It shows you figures on the uptake, trends, conversion to sharer across all of the sites that you have a Liftshare scheme for. As we've been supporting businesses for Liftshare communities for 25 years now, there are many reports delving into different figures that you can view, export and analyse on the dashboard already. But if there is anything that you'd like to add, we're always looking for feedback from businesses who want different views of the data that we can collect. So we'd love to talk through any requirements of anything that we've missed or anything you would like to see that's not on there already. This was a whistle-stop tour of the Liftshare product. There is a lot more to the member experience, all of the promotional support that we can help you with, and delving into that dashboard and all the reports on there. We'd be happy to take questions on those, so just pop them in the Q&A box, or we'd be more than happy to arrange a more in-depth demo to show you the live systems, the member experience and the dashboard. Another thing to mention is that a key driver of the Liftshare communities is linking to policy or car park permits. We're actually soon to be launching an integration with Octopass. They're a large parking permit provider who support many NHS organisations and trusts and other businesses in the UK. And what we're doing is linking our solutions with their permit application process. So I'll pass back to Max and Kyle to talk you through this technology.
Thanks, Sarah. So taking Liftshare for Work and the PTPs a step further then, how do we ensure that they are doing what they need to do so you're able to reach your net zero targets? Well, two answers really: parking policy and permit issuance. We can issue permits by basing allocation on an individual's viable commuting options. Those parameters can be customized and set by you as an organisation. Each site is going to have different parameters necessary. But really the PTPs kick off that permit application. Someone needs to go in, download their own PTP, and depending on the results of that PTP, they will be ranked and scored so that they can access a permit or not access a permit, depending on their score. Again, those parameters can be defined by you, And the permit issuance team can then accept the permit application based on your custom criteria. We even work with some partners, Octopass, who are a well-regarded parking permit software, to make the process even more automatic for you. The policy then. In our 25 years of experience, the biggest route to behaviour change really is having a fit-for-purpose policy. It underpins Liftshare, and the permit system then enforces that policy. It is written by our expert consultants to ensure that the policy matches the intent. And it really is the heart of making sure that your staff are doing what they need to do, but also that you're helping them. It's a two-way street. Ultimately, you need to be making sure that the options available to staff are plentiful. They have different ways of getting to your place of work. And if they don't, and they need to drive alone, then that's okay. They are able to get a permit based on that, and that is written into policy. It really is the heart of behaviour change for us, and there is a lot of surrounding material on policy and permit issuance. Again, if you would like more information on this, there is a lot to cover in it. Please do reach out to one of the team and we'll be happy to talk to you. Thanks for your time. I'll be handing you over to Kyle now.
Thanks very much, Max. So I'm just going to be bringing to life a little bit of what Max was talking about. So you'll recall that Max was talking about the PTPs and the widgets earlier on. So here at Liftshare, what we do is on our actual website, we have a dedicated PTP widget, which our employees can go ahead and engage with. Through this PTP widget, they would go ahead and enter in their details for where they are traveling from, so their home address to the office. They would input their inbound journey and outbound journey return times and dates along with their details, and they would go ahead and generate their PTP. As Max showed you earlier on, their PTP would provide them with all their sustainable travel options, from the most sustainable to the least sustainable, with obviously driving alone at the very end. Obviously, we want to be promoting the most sustainable travel options available to our employees. Now, accompanied with their travel plan, they will also receive an email. This is what actually delivers the actual personal travel plan itself. And this is fully customizable within the Mobilityways dashboard. And it will seamlessly go ahead and input the details that your employees need in order to apply for that car sharing permit or the P2P bank permit on the Octopass website, which is their integration that Max was talking about. In this example, what we've got here is some very clear information around how that person or that employee can go ahead and apply for that car sharing permit and the things that the steps they need to undertake in order to achieve that. In this example, we've clearly laid out how they can go ahead and register for a brand new account on the Octopass website, how they can log in, what they need to do, and also provide them with very specifically their PTP ID. And it's this ID that will connect to their car sharing permit. And when that's submitted, that will allow an admin to go ahead and very easily make a decision on whether or not they approve or reject a PTP-backed permit. So in this example, what this employee has done here at Liftshare is they've gone ahead and clicked on to register for an account. This takes you to the Octopass website, which can be fully customized to meet your business's kind of brand guidelines. And in this example, we've gone ahead and registered for accounts. We've gone through all the approval mechanisms that are required, and we've now landed on the dashboard. And this is a very easy, simple dashboard. It's very easy to kind of navigate around. In this example, what the employee has gone ahead and done, and they've clicked on to request the permit, and this has taken them through to their permit selection form. In this example, they've gone ahead and selected an annual permit, and this will load the permit form, which can be completely bespoke to your business's needs. We can collect all the relevant information that you will need in order to kind of effectively manage your car parking permits and also your car parks. In this example, we've got information like your vehicle registration details, the location that you work at, when you want the the permit to start from, the department you work in, etc. This can be completely customized, as I said. The important bit here is that on this form, there is a input field, which is the personal travel plan ID input. And this is where that employee will be required to go ahead and grab that PTP ID from their email and just pop it into their permit application. Once they have gone ahead and filled in the form and filled in their permit ID, they can go ahead and submit their application. What will happen is this permit will then be put forward to pending authorization or approval from a line manager or some kind of admin team. And what that will look like from an admin's point of view is they'll have their own dedicated dashboard where they'll be able to access all permit applications that have been issued, rejected, or still pending. And they'll be able to get a clear list of those permits. What you'll see on here is very clearly there's a PTP sustainability score. Now, depending on the result of your employee's PTP, we will give you a PTP score, which will translate into how sustainable or the sustainable options that that employee has in terms of commuting to and from work. And we'll quantify that into a number. This can be completely customized depending on obviously what your needs are. But what this allows is your car park management team to be able to look at a permit application and decide whether or not that permit should be approved or rejected depending on that PTP sustainability score. So as an example, you might say, okay, if the person has the ability to walk and cycle, they will then maybe have a set score for that. If they only have the ability to drive or use public transport, we can quantify that score depending on what your requirements are. The idea is that you can then use this information to be able to accurately decide whether or not that person gets that or not. In this example, what we do is if we have someone that has a very low PTP sustainability score, rather than rejecting it, we might then potentially ask that employee to go ahead and apply for a car sharing permit. And that's the next flow that I'm going to take you through. Again, it starts with a PTP widget where, of course, they'll go ahead and fill in their information. They will then receive their PTP. And then on that PTP email, there can be another section on there, which is instructions on how they can go ahead and apply for a car shared permit. And in this example, all the employee needs to do is go through the exact same steps that they did before, except they need to go ahead and select the car share permit form. And also they need to make sure that they've signed up for a Liftshare account. So in this example, what's happened is the employee has gone back to the car permit kind of management platform. They've selected a car share permit. And then on this form, there is a field that says, hey, what is your Liftshare token ID? And what will happen here is they'll input their Liftshare token ID, which is easily available from the Liftshare account, and they'll submit their application. The thing with the car share permits permits is that they are automatically approved, so they don't need to go through for management approval. The idea here is that they can begin to start using the car share base. However, they would need to prove that they are actually authenticating their journey. And authentication means that they're proving that they've actually shared their journey with another employee by scanning their dedicated QR code when they get into the car. And they won't be able to do that on site. They'll need to do it outside of your work's boundary. And the idea is that in order to manage whether or not people kind of check to see whether or not people are abusing the system or not, your dashboard allows you to very easily track to see how many times people are authenticating within a particular period of time. If when you are going through your car park and checking cars within a car sharing bays, you can tell, is the person parked in the car sharing bay and how often are they authenticating? If they are found to be parking in the car park way more than they're actually authenticating, then action then can be taken from there. An email can be sent to them telling them that they need to be authenticating each time they use the car park, or they could even have their permit revoked altogether. Of course, that's completely down to you. And yeah, so that is the two flows on how Liftshare can help you with your sustainable car park management. What I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be handing back over to Sarah. The key thing with Mobilityways is that we really want to support you with getting all of your data on commuting in one single place, from car park permits with Optipass to your Liftshare activity. Now, Sarah is going to be showing you how these data sets and other sources can be brought into the Mobilityways platform to give you an indication of what the bigger picture is. So over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Kyle. That's lots to go through, and obviously we understand that the permit application process takes lots of other factors, as well as whether they're a car sharer or their sustainable options. So if you've got any questions relating to that permit application process, please pop them in the Q&A box. Anything that we can't answer, we can speak to our partners at Optipass to help you answer those. And any more information about that process that Kyle showed as well, just pop the questions in there and we can answer those at the end or get back to you after this webinar. So what I wanted to go through with you today is some new sort of technology that we've been building this year, 2023. We're finding that businesses and large organisations want to be able to clearly see how much CO2 they're emitting and saving through commuting and working from home amongst their staff. So what we've done is developed a standardised methodology of data collection so that all the different modes that your employees use follow the same structure of calculating CO2. The aim of this is to give you that clearer picture on how much CO2 you're emitting, saving, and how you're tracking against your targets. So we've got two chart types that I'm going to show. The first is for data collected periodically, like quarterly or annual travel surveys. And another chart is for real-time data capture, like the usage of the Liftshare app, which tracks actual shares, a walking app that tracks actual walks, or something like a bus ticket API, which feeds data back into us based on actual bus tickets bought. Can I have the next slide, please? So this chart shows data from one of the businesses that we work with. They've actually been doing annual travel surveys dating back to 2019. It shows emissions for each mode extrapolated upwards across all of their employees. So for this particular business, they've got around 1,000 employees. They got around 200 to 300 survey responses. So what we've done is extrapolated that data, those responses upwards to show the emissions across their entire organisation. The large red chunk shown on the graph is their emissions from staff driving alone to work. Now we can see these emissions lowered during the pandemic, but increased again when working from the office in 2022 became the norm, although it still didn't reach back to pre-pandemic levels, which is good. So what we can see here on the right is all of the modes that the staff have said on the travel survey that they're using to get to work. All of those modes can be turned on and off, which is really useful if, like this business here, you've got a really large chunk of your employees using one method, like driving alone. So Jackson, next slide, please. So if we take out drive alone, we can see a more detailed view of all of those other modes. It sort of zooms in to those. We did see that driving alone method trending down over the years. However, these modes are on the increase. This is a good thing, as we can see that these modes are more sustainable than driving alone. Therefore, the adoption of these modes is good. With all of this data, we can show potential predictions of where the emissions will be coming from within your next annual travel survey or quarterly travel survey, based on all of the changes that have happened per mode over the last few years and those data sets that have been fed in previously. Next slide, please. This chart uses the same data set as the chart that we just showed, and that data set is from those quarterly or annual travel surveys. But what we've done here is switch the chart to show employees rather than emissions. We found that businesses want to see how modal shift is happening across the years amongst zero carbon commuting modes. But as walking and cycling don't emit anything, they won't show on that previous chart. So at least here you can see that the percentage of employees, how they're shifting across the years. And on the left there, we've also got a graph where we can show the number of employees and how they're shifting as well. Next slide, please. We also provide the ability to show you data capture across those real-time methods. So as I said before, these can be things like the usage of Liftshare apps, triple authentication technology, tracking actual shares, a walking app. We work with Better Points, that tracks walks, or information from your private shuttle bus, which could feedback data based on actual bus tickets bought. While your survey data can show you trends in the long term on those charts I've just shown, by using this real-time data tracking information, you can see the immediate uptake in the short term in a much more detailed way. Next slide, please. So an example of this we've got here. This shows weekly data capture captured between April and June across 7 sources of commuting data. The large red block is from this business. It's from their site's ANPR cameras, automatic number plate recognition cameras. And this shows all of the cars that are entering the car park, assuming that they're driving alone. This chart also shows data from Stagecoach bus ticket sales, Liftshare usage, where the sharers are triple authenticating on the Liftshare app. There's also a private shuttle bus in there at this particular site by Zelo. We showed that in the video at the beginning of this webinar. Wheels to Work is an e-scooter provider. They can give us data once a month, and we can plot that on this as well. And also walking and cycling data. In this particular case, the walking data has been fed through from Strava, where employees at that site have opted into a Strava leadership leaderboard sort of group where they can compete with one another. And the cycle data is taken from how many times the cycle storage gate has been closed, indicating how many bikes are in that cycle storage. This just gives you an idea of all of the different ways and all of the different data sets that we can get into our system, and we can track these, log these into the dashboard, and you can view it all in one place alongside all of the other modes. Next slide, please, Jackson. So the previous chart was showing the number of employees using each mode, where this chart only shows the modes that are actually emitting CO2. So we don't see any green blocks on this one, as they symbolise zero carbon commuting modes, but we can see all of the others. This example, between June and September, we can see much less emissions were emitted from commuting in that sort of June to September section. We know that there's much more annual leave around those months in the UK due to summer holidays. But on the previous chart, we also saw around that time an increase in commuting in those months, showing that it's not just a dip in your employee base, it's actually people using or adopting other modes in the summer. So they're not sort of going driving alone when the weather's warm, they're going towards walking and cycling. And then as we can see here, just after September, that increase in the other modes when the weather's turned colder is on the increase again. Next slide, please. If you go back one, Jackson, sorry. Thanks. So both of these charts, they are benefiting organisations that capture data across all of those modes. And what we're sort of speaking to clients about at the moment is a lot of businesses are saving all of this data on spreadsheets, PDFs, separate per mode. These sort of data sets, they're easy to lose, difficult to sort of manage across large organisations. So being able to log into Mobilityways, seeing all of your commuting data in real time in one place means that reporting back at board level doesn't need the resource to prep that data, to find it. We know that we've got walking data from 2018. Where is it? Where's that spreadsheet? It's all ready to go into the dashboard and update as often as you want to feed that data in. Happy to take any questions around low and high frequency, these data sets, these charts, and anything else that we've gone through today. Just pop them into the Q&A box. So back to you, Basil.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Carl and Max, there for that whistle-stop tour of some of our headline hero products here at Mobilityways. We actually have got some really exciting new products coming live in the next quarter, but we wanted to focus today on the products suite as it currently stands. And I can see from the huge flurry of questions that have come in, there's been lots of interest there. So we're really probably not going to have time to go through all the questions, but we'll try to get through as many as we can over the next few minutes. And maybe if Kyle, Max and Sarah will join me on screen, and then we will go through these. So I've been looking through, and a collection of the questions relate to how we calculate emissions and source emissions data. Well, what Max went through there was the gold standard of capturing employee commute data, which is the travel survey. And so there are other methods of gathering data, and we're working on many of those. But the gold standard for many years has been an annual, typically annual travel survey. And there's quite a few questions here about how you collect this data. So I wondered maybe if, Sarah, you could just go through in a little more detail, the headlines at least, that process of getting a travel survey out and how that ends up with an emissions calculation.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So we've got two different ways that you can send out a travel survey to your staff. One is via a link. So you can create the travel survey using the templated questions that we've researched. You can add in your own questions. You can use your own questions complete set and not use our template if you wanted. And some of the questions that we ask in that are used to create that ACEL. They're a standard set of questions that capture frequency, so how often that individual is travelling to work, distance, whether they are they've got a 2-mile journey or a 20-mile journey, and the mode. So are they walking, cycling, driving, using an electric vehicle, a taxi, etc. And once we've got that data, we can then generate an ACEL. The other way is from sending it out via our dashboard. So if you did want to upload all of your contacts, your email addresses of your employees into our system, we can do that. You can personalize the travel survey email body and send out that survey from our system directly to your staff. It's the same way of capturing that data from those 3 questions that capture distance, frequency, and mode. So no matter if you've used the link or sent it out via a system, we can capture that. Once that comes into us, our consultant commutologists generate an ACEL for you. And as Max showed, that gives you an ACEL report showing that top line figure of where you are, comparing it to the national average, and giving you a breakdown of all the modes that your employees use and how much emissions are coming from each of those modes.
Thanks, Sarah. And we've got a sort of a related question here, which is about if surveys are anonymous traceable. Kyle, do you want to just outline the sort of different approaches with the advantage to non-anonymous data, but also how we can handle anonymous data?
Yeah, sure. So the advantage of having non-anonymous data is that you can pretty much then use that information then to start to kind of create different cohorts amongst your employees as well. So really start to create distribution lists so you can target individuals who maybe have addressed or expressed maybe particular concerns with maybe their current way of traveling, or maybe a way that they sorry, I got confused there. So or maybe if you've asked them whether or not they'd be open to other forms of sustainable traveling, you then have a clear indication of who has opted in for those various modes, and then you can target them individually with the right targeting messages. Of course, if you decide to go for an anonymous survey, that of course sometimes can help with GDPR struggles that you might be faced with, but obviously there are some limitations on there. But it does mean that it's much easier to distribute those emails as well, because you can include those surveys, because you can include those in newsletters, or you can send them out using your own marketing commerce channels.
I think that's exactly right, isn't it, Carl? Because it's that balancing act between getting surveys out and getting high response rates, which kind of lends itself to anonymous and just, people can be giving honest answers, and you can get it out very quickly, versus the fidelity, detail of having individual people non-anonymous, because then with those you can follow up, you can actually implement reduction methods by communicating to them. So it's this balancing act that has to be done.
And also the other thing to mention as well is that if you are sending out emails that are non-anonymous, we can, if you're asking about information from your respondents about what measures you should implement as a business that would really help to drive the right behavior change, then what you can do with those non-anonymous emails is you can then track to see what the error of margin is on those responses. So you can then really prove whether or not you can trust the information that's within that those surveys, and whether or not they represent the vast majority of the views and the beliefs of the people that you've surveyed. With anonymous surveys, that's a little bit more difficult, because you can't really verify whether or not you've reached that error of margin.
And I guess this is very related to the next question we've got here, which is, how do you deal with staff resistance? Because actually one of the big challenges here is the measurement is one piece. It's important because you need to know the benchmark. If you can't measure your emissions, you're not going to know whether you're making progress or where to focus your energies. But unlike many other sources of emissions, the difference with commuting is that it only reduces, commuter emissions only reduce when your staff change their behavior. So for example, if you want to move to energy efficient lighting, you pay the bill, you have the lighting replaced, and then you have energy efficient lighting. Whereas to reduce your commuter emissions, you have to convince, encourage, support your staff to make sustainable choices every time they come to the office. And that means bringing your staff with you. And so, Max, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the best practices that we've seen, for example, in your client base, with how you can motivate staff through policy and also rewards and incentives to make sustainable choices?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there in that question, actually. Sticking with Mobilityways then, is actually we need to understand and quantify what that resistance is. It's going to be different in every organisation, even at a site level, it's going to be different. And really that's where the surveys do come into their own. We can start to gather staff feedback back, and actually working with our consultants, we can start to quantify what level of resistance that is, but also more importantly is what they're asking for to overcome that resistance. So that is things like an incentive program for Liftshare, a higher rate on a cycle to work scheme so they can get a smarter e-bike, for example, more cars available on a car scheme. All these different things that's fed back to us and to you as an organisation through the survey, and we can start to action that accordingly. Similarly as well, if you wanted to take a different approach to overcome that resistance, is we can start to implement a different type of policy, change some points in there. We can either make it softer or harder depending on that level of resistance. So you can actually start to enforce that, and use the people that have switched to a new mode as a case study, to encourage those others that are a bit slower to engage with what we're trying to do. Ultimately, that's where the importance of Mobilityways and Liftshare comes in, is to encourage a smarter way to travel so people can benefit from a cheaper way of working, and also benefits the environment too.
Thanks, Max. So we'll change a little bit to another set of topics here. And so we've got a question. Are you aware of any legal need to report CO2e for co-workers in the UK? Exists in some European countries. And so commuting emissions is part of what's called Scope 3. If you're not a sustainability practitioner, there are 3 international scopes of emissions. Scope 1 and 2 are more direct emissions, such as energy usage and consumption. Scope 3 is your indirect value chain as an organization. And so that could include the emissions of your suppliers and transportation costs, for example. And one of those transportation emissions, and one of those Scope 3 emissions is commuting, your staff getting to work. And the reason why employers have to take ownership of it is, if it were not for the employer, their staff would not be making that commute and therefore giving out those emissions. And that's why it forms part of an organization's value chain. In the UK, there is currently no broad, although it's a little bit different for some public sector organisations, there's no broad requirement for large employers to report their Scope 3 emissions. However, that is the clear movement, and most large employers are now voluntarily reporting their Scope 3 emissions. and many are also breaking it down per scope 3 emissions source. For us, though, our specialty here is not just the measurement of commuter emissions, it's the actual practical support and tools to reduce it. And the measurement is one challenge, and there are challenges involved with measuring commuter emissions accurately. But the real big job is the tools, services, and behavior change that's required for an organization to move from move to net zero commuting. And so there's lots of things wrapped up. In Europe, there's a more regulatory framework requiring a decarbonisation of commuting. That's coming here, but what we have at the moment is a government policy to decarbonise the commute, but nothing mandatory. A question here then, perhaps for you, Sarah, how do you differentiate between staff and visitors in the high frequency dashboard?
I'm assuming that this might be related to the ANPR data set. So for that particular business, the camera was for a staff car park only. If you did have a car park where visitors and staff can access, if your ANPR provider has a whitelisted list of registration plates that are staff only, we can match those to say, like, this was a visitor, this was a member of staff. Obviously, they probably don't have the visitor registration plate. So if it was whitelisted, we can associate that to staff members. And before uploading or before putting that data set onto the high frequency dashboard graph, we can make sure that we remove all visitors. Hope that answers your question if it was ANPR.
Okay, and then we've got here a question here about, have you considered adding cost to the data on personal travel plans? And so, interesting angle there. I don't know whether Kyle or Sarah, which one of you wants to take that one?
I can take that one. So cost associated with the different modes on personal travel plans was something that we had. Some of the bus information that we can get in to show did have costs, and some doesn't have costs set available because they change so often. So it did seem a bit of, we just got some user feedback, and it was a bit woolly for some of the personal travel plans, because some of the bus tickets had, or bus sort of journeys had a price associated, and some didn't. So we've removed them, but all of the links to the bus providers are on the PTPs. So if Stagecoach provided a bus in Manchester, it can link straight through to that site. Same with Arriva buses or First Bus, anything like that, it can go directly through to the site, so the costs can show on there.
Thank you, Sarah. So we've got here a comment from the Association of Transport Coordinating Officers, John Carr, who says that local authority staff deliver all forms of local authority transport and active travel. LTAs are also spatial planning and roads authorities. The UK government has a habit of devolving transport policy implementation to LAs. Can I ask you and the audience to support our call that LAs need staff and resources to give the clout to make things happen? Absolutely, local authorities are key partners in decarbonising the commute. And so we work with a lot of LAs across the UK, but even in our work with private organisations, private large employers, LAs are huge facilitators. And the government did release about a year ago the local transport decarbonisation toolkit as part of the decarbonisation plan. There's a lift sharing toolkit in which we feature as a case study in there. But John, do drop us a note, because I'll put you in touch with our sector director for local authorities, who'd be a good contact for you, and would probably agree with your sentiment there. Okay, we've got a next question here is, do you actually get much uptake? I think this is talking about Liftshare specifically. We have a workforce of 12,000 distributed across the city. We have had various different car share schemes over the years and never get much traction amongst employees. And so, Max, do you want to talk a little bit about what's important in launching a Liftshare community to build success and uptake?
So there's many things really. I mean, look, you firstly need an internal buy-in. So from yourself, your team, you need to allocate resource to growing your Liftshare community. Really, you need to get it to a point where it is a self-sustaining community. So, you have sign-ups, so your colleagues will sign up. They need to add the journey, and they need to confirm their lift sharing. They're the sort of three key elements to get a lift share underway. And we need to make it sure in communications that they are doing that. Some companies like to incentivize one of those stages. But really, it's for you to understand what measurement of success you're looking at, whether it's enforced by a local authority that you need to achieve a car sharing rate, or if it's just a staff benefit, or somewhere in between one of those. You're going to have a different level of success based on the input that you give. We are the experts. We will create, the policy documents, etc., that you need. We can recommend incentive programs that we know work, given a sort of rough structure of your own company. It's a combination of many different things as to why a Liftshare community is successful. But for you and the power that you have as an individual, that first internal buy-in is really important to get it up and running.
Thanks, Max. And so a question here about the commuter emissions. So it's 5% of all UK emissions, but what does that look like for an individual company? And so this really ranges. And so obviously, if you're a manufacturing company with large industrial machinery, then your commuting might form a very small part of your emissions. And we work with several manufacturers, automotive manufacturers. In fact, we work with most of the major automotive manufacturers that have factories here in the UK. And the commuting emissions is a small part of what they do, but the thing is, it's something that their staff can influence and change. And that's quite important for getting team buy-in. And you have to decarbonize your entire value chain. And so commuting still is important, even if it's a small percentage. We also work a lot with the NHS, and the NHS, it's 4% of the NHS's total footprint, environmental footprint, is from commuter emissions. But interestingly, because the NHS is such a huge organization employing over 1 million people, 1.2 million people, that commuting emissions might just be 4% of their total emissions, but it's actually more emissions than the whole emissions output, greenhouse gas emissions output of the country of Rwanda, which is 12 million people. So, the percentage might be small, but the actual quantity of greenhouse gas emissions can be high. That goes all the way up to 20, 25, 30% of emissions for completely white collar service-based jobs where they really only have an office and that's their only source of emissions. So big range, but it's important. Even if it's a small percentage, it could be a large number. Okay, we've run over a little bit of time, so I think we'll take one final question and then we'll, I think, probably have to follow up on email for the rest here. And so let's see. Let's say Sarah, I think this is Liftshare oriented, but it might be more broadly just with commuting. Can we, do we take account of multi-stop journeys, for example, if you have to drop the kids off to school on the route to work?
Yeah. So with Liftshare, if you've got when you put in your start and end destination, we'll use our route mapping system to guess what the best, or not guess, predict what the best route is to get to work, and show you pick-up en route, as well as people that are at the beginning of that destination that live very close to your home address. If that journey doesn't go via the school, you can drag the line and reroute it. So if you did need to go, rather than down a dual carriageway or something like that for your 15-minute drive into the city, you actually need to drop off at the local primary school before entering that dual carriageway. You can just drag that along, and that will reroute your Liftshare journey, and therefore reroute your matches. So if there's matches that are on the new route that weren't on the old route, they will appear as your pick up en route options.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, thank you, everybody that's attended. Thank you for all the questions. We're going to follow up on any questions we've not answered offline, but please do get in touch. And that's my contact details there on the screen. So if you have any questions of any sort, drop me a note. I'll route it to the right person at our end if I'm not the right person. But please do get in touch. If you want to delve deeper and have a personalized demo, personalized conversation, do just drop me an email, basil@mobilityways.com, and I will hook you up with one of our team. It's been good seeing so many people come and join us today. And thank you to my colleagues, Kyle, Max, and Sarah. If you had any questions at all, do drop me a note, and thank you for joining us.